All right, welcome to an episode of Leaving the Pack. Today with me, I have Tom McCann Sr., a lifetime lifeguard, devoted educator, administrator, and writer and author of the book called The Guards. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast, even though I asked you impromptu.
I'm happy to be here. It's a real pleasure.
Okay, great. So you may not know this, but I ask all of our guests the same first question. So the name of the podcast is called Leaving the Pack. And I'm curious what that phrase means to you.
I like that title. I think it's really a good title. And being in education, it's appropriate in so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
Administratively, if you're in the teachers union or if you're dealing with kids and you're telling them how to think and what to do to lead them in the right direction. And a lot of that has to do with leaving the pack. Because if you're following the pack, then someone's telling you what to do.
Right.
And once someone tells you what to do, you're doing their bidding, so to speak. And that is not a healthy environment for teachers, administrators, or most importantly, the students.
Mm-hmm. So you grew up pretty much in a pack of your own, right?
Yes, I did.
And how many members are in your family?
I am one of 11 children of Chuck and Mary McCann.
And how many boys, girls make up the 11?
I grew up in Battleground, 7 sisters.
Oh, seven sisters.
And I'm one of 5 boys.
And what number are you in the pack?
Well, I'm the 6th.
The 6th.
Right.
So I think one of the first times we met, I also told you that my dad is one of 14. Mm-hmm. He's the 9th. So it's 9 brothers, 5 sisters. And my mom is one of 8. And wow, she is the only girl. So,
so 7 brothers.
Exactly. She's tough.
Jeez. She has no choice.
Exactly. So what did that mean, like growing up in that large of a family? Because you were a pack in and of itself.
And that's probably helped me in many ways. Mm-hmm. In retrospect, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right.
And but when you're in the middle of it, exactly, in prime time, when you're a junior in high school, you don't want to see any of them. So
although I feel like the McCann brothers must have been notorious in high school. Like if you mess with one, you've messed with suddenly a gang of brothers.
Right. And that helps out in a lot of ways. And it really helps out my sisters. When mm-hmm. they were growing up, the guys would be a little more careful on how to talk to my sisters or something.
That's like reason enough to have a big family.
Right there. It's a protective group right around you. But there's a lot of benefits of being in a big family. 7 sisters, you learned real quickly from my father was a very strong Irish Catholic man, and he mm-hmm. was the head of the household. Mm-hmm. And if he needed to remind you, he did.
Yeah.
But you didn't have to be reminded because he was a pretty solid guy in his ways. But my sisters had the right of way for everything. The boys could fight all day long, which we did. You couldn't touch the girls. Mm-hmm. That was hands off. And so when they argued with you, you couldn't argue back. You could argue back, but you couldn't do what you normally do with your older brother.
Which is like wrestle.
Right, you wrestle on the floor.
Fight to the death.
Right. So we did grow up with that kind of mentality of respecting females in a very, very large way.
And was that your dad, like modeling with your mother, or like how did he go about making sure that each of his sons kind of knew the line between, how to treat one another? But
well, they did, my parents did very artfully too. They disciplined in packs. They didn't discipline Tom by himself.
Okay.
They'd say, you guys and gals, here's the rules. If you go out the window again to go outside, there's gonna be problems. But they were really talking to me or my brother Charlie or Joe. But that was a really good technique as far as trying to get everybody in order. Mm-hmm. Here are the rules, but they're really targeting someone else in the family. And that was a great way of disciplining the family and leading the family in the right direction. My father was an excellent role model. He never argued with my mother. I don't remember him ever yelling at my mother
That's
or
amazing.
backwards. Yes,
Yeah,
amazing. Now, I'm sure they disagree with each other.
sure, but they may have done it in private.
They
Yeah.
did, I'm sure, but we never heard it. And
Wow.
I think he did that because he grew up without a father.
Hmm.
He never got past fourth grade. So he was really a man in his own way,
Yeah.
developing his own path, and he
Okay.
did that. And he was very individualistic in his ways.
Yeah. And did his father pass away at a young age or?
His father died in 1933, I believe it was, in the Philadelphia flu epidemic.
Oh, wow.
Both of my grandfathers died in that epidemic
Oh,
in
that's
Philadelphia.
terrible.
One at 31, Daniel Brennan, and then my grandfather, John McCann.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, but when you were growing up, because it sounds like your parents really instilled that you're a family unit, that even when they're disciplining, they're making sure that it's not just individual, it's everybody. Was there ever a sense to that they wanted each of you to kind of like follow your own passions, or did that just evolve over time? Or are you and your siblings like naturally interested in different things so that happened on its own?
Um, that's a good question. I think that they started out pointing in the direction of education. And what they did, they had a rule for my sisters that do not marry a guy that is not a college graduate
Okay.
because they didn't have the education, the formal education. They had the street savvy education, but not the formal education that they probably wanted to get. My mother graduated from John Hallahan High School in Philadelphia, and her mother did everything she could to get her there. And my father, like I said, got to fourth grade, but he had to work, and he worked on the streets. My father was a street fighter in Philadelphia.
Wow.
Yeah, he fought his way through life. Um, so the idea that you go off and do something on your own, I get education was the driving force
Okay.
because the way I'm looking at it, we weren't educated. We want everybody to be educated
Right.
because that's that's the pathway to individual freedom.
Yeah. And every generation tries to kind of like better the next generation
Exactly.
behind them.
But my parents were also
Ideally.
wise in, yes, they were wise in that my mother never lost that touch of staying in touch with reality.
Mhm.
Like my father, when the girls were all growing up, my father always wanted one of his daughters to be a nun.
Okay.
And because he had three aunts that were nuns.
Oh, wow.
So they were in the Philadelphia Archdiocese, and they were all in different orders. My mother, on the other hand, would say, I don't want any of my daughters to be nuns. So it was that dichotomy in how you were handling things. And she'd say that in front of my sisters because she would think that it's a very lonely life being
Yeah.
a nun.
Yeah.
And since she went to Catholic grade school and high school, she had a sense. My father didn't have that sense.
Right.
He didn't have that experience. And but he was very close with the local pastor, Father McPeak, who he credits for getting him to where he got to.
Yeah. So, so it's interesting you talk about marriage. Did your sisters follow your dad's advice on all marrying college grads?
Almost completely, yes. Yeah, they did. They did. And if they didn't make it, one didn't make it to graduate with a degree, but he was in school for 3.5 years.
Okay.
And circumstances prevented him from
Yeah.
finishing up. But yeah, they did. That was a goal. But as we got older, as we all got older, we would start weighing in on things like that.
Yeah.
Like that college education is good, but I know a lot of guys that are college educated knuckleheads.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And
there's no guarantee just because
no, absolutely
you
not.
have it.
And I guess he was going through his own growth thing that way.
Right.
He was impressed with college education. He was impressed with high school graduation. So he was really impressed when we all went to college. Every one of us attended and graduated. And I don't know how we did it because they didn't have any money. We lived well. We ate every night together and did all those things, but there wasn't an extra penny anywhere.
Yeah.
Especially not to get educated
Yeah.
with a college education.
I've realized so many times when we've been talking how many parallels there are between like how you grew up and how my parents
Oh, yeah.
grew up too,
Yeah.
which is interesting because, we're sometimes I wonder if it's because we're also Catholic, if there's some just like common themes that come into how you raise your children. But I've also realized like on the outside, you would think like Irish and Indian culture probably couldn't be any more different in
Hmm.
some ways. But when I hear stories about my parents growing up, it was very similar. It was, we've always had like a priest or a nun as part of like a generation. So
Hmm.
my mom's brother became a priest, but it was almost expected that like, or hoped for that someone in that generation
Right.
would devote themselves to the church.
There's always expectation from the church.
And it was also like a point of pride, right? That like
Absolutely.
someone in our family
Yeah,
has devoted
absolutely.
themselves, but also that education. My dad's parents, and my mom's parents were not, they didn't graduate from high school or college either, except my grandfather on my dad's side, he was a lawyer. But so when they had these large families too, they would always talk about education was the way that no matter what they decided, at minimum, all of them had to graduate high school, but they all of them, all on my dad's side and then all on my mom's side, all went through college too. But the sentiment maybe was a little bit different because the education was the pathway also in leaving India. Like, in order to leave India, like most of them were professionals, that
Yeah.
was kind of the way that you could actually, find a way to leave. And it wasn't that they had to leave India. It was more like if you wanted to open yourself up to different things, that education was going to be the pathway. And then also, it was so related to marriage too. It would be like, for our family, we are at minimum going to have, especially the daughters, marry a certain type of person because it's that feeling of like, we always want this generation to somehow be better than the last
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
generation.
Yeah.
And my dad will always say, which I've told you too, like, they all ate together,
Yeah.
but he definitely had to like spit on food to make sure that he could actually have a meal.
Yeah.
Um, and my dad even went to a seminary for 2 years so that he could eat really
Yeah, I
well.
love that story. That's a really good story. That's
um,
called survival.
exactly.
Right.
It's like the long game on how to have a steady meal for
Right.
at least 2 years.
Right.
But it's interesting how many times I've seen kind of parallels when you've talked about your own kind of growing up with stories I've heard from my parents growing up. And it's funny because now in my generation, it is so rare to have a large
Oh, yes. Yeah,
family.
true.
So even when people have, more than 3 kids, if they have 4 plus,
Right.
you're like, wow, that's such a large family. But
Right.
in my parents' generation, your generation, it's especially if you're Catholic, it was very
Right.
common that you had a
Right.
very large family. Um, so what did you study in college?
I went to community college.
Mhm.
Well, let me back up. When I graduated from high school, I didn't go anywhere. I was kind of a beach guy. I was
Yeah.
always on the beach. And so whenever we had a summer home in down the shore in Seattle City, outside of Philadelphia, and we rented, we didn't own it at the time. But what we did was we would go back at the end after Labor Day, the family. Well, I stayed down in the shore, and I was surfing and just hanging around the beach and things of that nature. So I stayed down, but my sister Jean wanted to go to college. She graduated the year after me, so I ended up driving her. My mother was a very good psychologist without the degree, and she said,
Life
"Tom,
psychologist.
yes, yes," and she'd say, "Tom, you drive Jean to school."
Okay.
So I was the driver. So I drive her to Atlantic Community College in Mays Landing, New Jersey. And I'd drive her up and I'd say, hurry up, get your class done because I want to get back to the beach. So I'd sit in the car. Well, after a while, I felt pretty stupid. I'm sitting in the car and she's in there getting I'm going to take one. My mom says, why don't you just take one class?
There you go.
And that was the hook.
Yeah.
But she knew me. I didn't want anything to do with school. After I graduated from high school, I got the diploma through
Yeah.
in the air. I said, I can't stay in school, just like some other guys was listening to a
Yeah.
little while ago, a little girl. I wasn't a student. And because I was doing all the things I didn't want to do, I wanted to be outside.
Hmm.
And it evolved from there. So I went to community college and got a degree at Atlantic Community College. Then I started rowing at Atlantic Community College, and I got a scholarship to row at Temple University in
Oh,
Philadelphia.
wow.
So I did Temple University. I graduated with a degree in education from Temple in marketing and economics.
Okay.
And then after that, immediately after that, I went down in Florida and lifeguarded. I thumbed it down. I didn't have a car, and took me quite a while to get down here.
Did your mom know you were hitchhiking?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I said,
There's nothing
well, see,
stopping
my
you.
mom made me promise not to. See, after I graduated from Land Community College, she wanted me to then take the scholarship to Temple. I didn't want to take it. I wanted to lifeguard down in Florida.
Oh, wow.
But she said, listen, just do this for me. And I did it. And so I said, but okay. So at the end, it was time for the ceremony, commencement. I didn't go to it.
You don't walk for your mom?
No,
Oh,
she said, you don't have to
no.
walk. Oh, you got the degree. I'm
That's a
okay
nice
with that.
mom.
Yeah. She says, as long as you got your degree, go ahead. So 2 days after I graduated, I thumbed it to Florida. And it was a good experience. It was a great experience. And after that, I lifeguarded, and I've been lifeguarding there for a while. And then
And where in Florida?
Hollywood, Florida.
Okay.
Yep, Hollywood, Florida. And
Did you know anyone down there, or
yeah,
was
I knew
it
other
like as
lifeguards.
far as a hitchhiker could go?
Oh yeah, that was a little weird. Yeah, it was really weird, but I didn't care. I was back at pickups. I was sleeping
Wow.
in Georgia, but I was getting down here to lifeguard.
Yeah.
I'm in Florida now, so it worked out pretty good. And then I ended up going back and got my master's degree. At that time, my wife talked me into that. I got married, and she was she was a great student. I wasn't a good student, but she pushed me, and I got my master's degree at Glassboro. And then after that, I went to University of Penn in Philadelphia and got my degree in educational leadership. Then I got my doctorate at Temple University
Oh, wow.
in school administration.
Who knew? Lifetime student.
Oh, my mother.
So my dad actually is very similar. So he rarely would go to school, even though they would drop him off at school, and then he would somehow leave. And he wanted to be a farmer, truly. And outside, he just really could not stand being inside. And his dad, who was a lawyer, told him, all I need you to do is just graduate high school, like just at minimum, just graduate high school. Yeah. And he said, and my dad then confessed he missed most of high school, like even though they dropped him. And he said, well, you have the exams in like 2 weeks. So if you can study for 2 weeks, I will give you like 100 rupees, which at the time was like a lot of money. Wow. Just if you pass, and you can start whatever it is that you want. I just need you to graduate high school. So my dad was like, wow, this is like more money than I could ever get access to. Right. And so he studied for 2 weeks. And the way that you enter like further education is through essentially like rankings after your high school exam. So like the top scores end up going to medical school, like the next set go to engineering, right. The next set become lawyers, and so on and so forth. So my dad studies with the hope of just becoming a farmer, like, I do this for you. I'm going to get the high school diploma. I'll take the cash. And he does exceptionally well. And it puts him in rankings to go to med school. Oh, geez. And his dad was like, there you go. Yeah. Now you know what your future is going to be. And he begrudgingly, and in between, he went to the seminary for food. Yeah. And then left. And then ended up going to med school very young. Because he was, I think, the youngest. He was close to like 17, 18. Yeah. Because also it's different, where it's not where you do 4 years of university, then med school. It's kind of like all together.
Continuation.
Yeah. And so my dad always says like he was like the youngest person in med school, like all these things because he actually went to be a farmer
Yeah.
and just ended up kind of in that way. So it's just funny where you can end up landing, especially as someone who didn't want to go to school. Suddenly he was in med school, residency, like so many
Right, right.
years of school.
That's great.
But it's just and it's interesting. Like now I see so much of that still in him of like wanting to return to some of his original likes of being
Sure.
outside and not being like always inside and kind of a farmer, I guess, even still. But so I have to ask, because you mentioned your wife.
Mhm.
I think I remember the story correctly that you actually met on the beach,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So how did you guys meet?
Well, when I was in Seattle City, like I said, I was really lifeguarding in my head since I was 5 years old.
Mhm.
So when I became a lifeguard at 14, I was a real part-timer.
And was that very young at
Very
that
young,
time?
yes.
Okay,
I
because
started
what's
at
the average age of a lifeguard?
16,
16,
17.
yeah.
Yeah.
14 seems very young.
Yeah, me and my brother John and I both got there and started at 14. Um, and then after a period of time, I became a guard, then a senior guard, then a lieutenant. Then I became the assistant captain. I became captain of the beach patrol, which is a unit of about 60 guards.
Wow.
So I was running that operation for a while. And what I used to do in the morning is patrol the beach in a Jeep with one of my lieutenants or by myself.
And how old are you now
I'm
during this
73.
time?
Oh,
No,
there,
then
then
like
I'm
when you're beach patrolling,
26,
26.
27,
Okay.
27. And we used to patrol the beach. So when I'm on the beach coming around during the day, I'm with one of the fellow guards, my assistant captain. I see Jerry on the beach. That's
Your
my
wife.
wife.
Mm-hmm.
And she's watching two little babies. She's babysitting her brother's kids. So I said, now that's the kind of girl you want to marry.
You
Says,
just knew
I
by
just
sight
looked
because
at it,
she's
just
like
like,
with kids, she's maternal.
it looked great. She looked great. And I said, lifeguards had a reputation. It's not all true, but a lot of it is.
Some of it's based in truth.
Yeah. So some of it is. And so I said to my buddy Tom, I said, I'm going to ask her out. So she's not going to go out with guys like us. So
Okay.
I just, hey, how you doing? And she would reluctantly wave, and I kept on going. So I swung back later on that day, and I saw her on the beach again in the morning because I did that every day.
Okay.
She was on those radar things looking for
Gold.
gold. Yeah.
And
So
she found gold.
so my term with that, she didn't find gold, but I found a gem.
There you go.
So it worked
That
out
line in
great.
itself probably worked.
Well, I didn't say that toward that. That materialized later on, but it's true. So I got lucky because a lot of times you have to have luck in life.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky. And so then I asked her out for that night. I said, I'll be up, but I didn't have a car. So I had a bicycle. But my mother, again,
And she immediately said yes.
she said, stop by the house, which was right on the beach. They
Okay.
were renting from a doctor.
Get through my dad, she said.
Well, that's what the idea was. So I make a long story short, I guess I can say. So I go home, and after work, I go rowing every day, and I was exhausted. But anytime I was in bed, my mother never woke me up.
Oh, wow.
So she let me sleep because I'd sleep right through the night.
Yeah. You're out in the sun, you're doing strenuous exercise all
Exactly.
day.
So, and she did that with me and my brothers. If you were sleeping, you made sure she made sure you ate. Hey, I'll wake you up, and she never would. Well, I had asked Jerry to go out that night, so I didn't show up.
You didn't show up on your first
My
date?
first date, I didn't show up.
Wow. And
So
you've been paying for it ever since.
probably. That's right. So my father-in-law, who was a Superior Court judge and a lawyer,
Oh,
tells
sure,
Jerry,
he loved that.
bums. These guys are bums, these lifeguards. I told you
And
that.
she's waiting at the front door
She's-
saying, Dad, I promise.
Yeah,
He's different.
right. And he goes, I told you. And then my father-in-law went to
And how
Temple.
old was she at the time?
Well, she was
You were
like
26, 20.
She
Okay,
was
yeah.
20. So that was done. Yeah. So the next day I go by, I say, I'm sorry, I sleep. Yeah, right. I think her father, don't talk to him anymore.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
she's done
you
with
burnt
you.
my daughter. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a pretty funny, and that being really a funny joke for the rest of our lives. Um, and
Sounds
so
like she at least believes in second chances.
obviously, yeah, yeah. So that was it. So it's worked out beautifully since.
And how long have you guys been married?
In November, it'll be 45 years.
Wow. So she was with you at what point? You're still lifeguarding when you guys get married, or are you in school now studying for education?
Well, they kind of run parallel
Yeah.
tracks. Um, I'm still lifeguarding.
Okay.
Yeah, I was lifeguarding for a long time.
Yeah.
Even though I did when I was in Seattle, I ended up not getting politically reappointed. So the city of Wildwood called me and asked me if I'd come over there and help restructure the beach patrol, which I did do with my brother John. And I was there for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But before I left for Wildwood, I told Jerry I was done with lifeguard, but I wasn't.
Oh.
So it worked out that way
And
for
as the
me.
intro said, you were a lifetime
Yes,
lifeguard, so far from done.
far from done. Yeah, I was there for 10 years.
Yeah. Something I really didn't realize because we've met since I know you through your son, who I met when he moved to Florida, similar to sounds like his dad.
Right.
But I didn't realize because I think when you go on the beach and you see lifeguards, you just think, oh, these are, jobs that younger kids do, teenage and young adulthood.
Right.
And it was really new to me to learn about the history of lifeguarding
Right.
and almost kind of like military like training that happens so intensive. There's different patrol groups, there's like history of lifeguards.
Right.
So talk to me more about kind of like where how you got into lifeguarding, like what appealed to you, like how many of your family members did lifeguarding. I know that your son did lifeguarding too. Like how does that or what is that culture like, because I think for many people it's a culture that they don't really know or appreciate.
Yeah. Yes, it's another very good question because a lot of people don't understand it
Yeah,
and they don't know the magnitude of the responsibility
sure.
that you have.
Yeah,
In retrospect, the 14-year-old thing really isn't appropriate.
yeah.
Um,
Despite how talented you
yeah,
might be.
and,
Yeah.
and many other guys. There were a lot of guys that were really much better at it than I was. But they get on 14. It was too much responsibility for kids. But anyway, it taught me responsibility real
Yeah, because
quickly.
it's quickly life or death
Yes,
in many
and
situations.
in
And most
situations,
when you're really intervening.
right? And the what you learn from that kind of changes your whole life.
Yeah, I
Um,
bet.
there are a lot of lifeguards that have been extremely successful in life as lawyers and doctors and educators. I entered the lifeguarding at a very early age, and it just was part of my life from the beginning.
And did you know someone before that did lifeguarding, or were you one of
My
the first
father,
in your family to join?
my sister Marianne was a lifeguard, and my brother Joe was a lifeguard. So
And they're older than you?
they're both older than
Okay.
me. My sister was at a pool, and my brother Joe got on the beach patrol, and he did it for several years, but he didn't fall for it like I did. I mean,
Mhm.
I made it. I made it
It's a
my life.
passion.
I
Yeah.
made it my life, and because I saw the benefit of it, and I guess they saw the captain of the beach patrol at the time saw how much I was enjoying it because what they would start doing is sending the new guards down to me when I became a senior guard to teach the lifeguarding. And I
Yeah.
would teach all day
Right.
because I enjoyed teaching. It got to be so regular that then they end up having what they call rookie school, and I taught rookie school. So I
Okay.
taught all the newcomers, I guess when I was about a seventh year in the beach patrol. And that's when I realized that I can keep this going if I'm a teacher.
So is that how you ended up deciding to go into education?
Yeah, that's what was driving because I was in the school business at Temple University, but I didn't want to be in the school business. I just was doing it because my mother made me. But when I got the scholarship for rowing, that was my motivator to finish because when I was going to school all the other years, I was working 2 jobs to have enough money to go to school.
Right.
So it didn't come easy to me, but it was the best thing in the world for me.
Yeah.
That's what kids don't realize. You're better off out there grinding the grindstone and earning your keep and making it work. So the experience of being a teacher on the lifeguards transcended right into teaching in school. So because I was getting good results, I was preparing my lesson plans without knowing there were lesson plans.
Yeah.
I just write
Something
it
that
down.
naturally
It
came
just
to you.
how do I do my okay? What am I going to teach tomorrow? What am I going to do? And I laid it out where I actually ended up writing a manual. But
Oh, wow.
Like at 21 years old, 22 years old, putting a manual together for training, filming. I was doing things that
For
were
lifeguard?
for lifeguard.
Okay.
Yes. So when the guards came down, every aspect of lifeguarding was covered.
Okay.
More than the neighboring beach patrols even. They
Yeah.
said, geez, we didn't take the guys out in the boat after the third day. I said, no, I got them rowing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't putting them down or them putting me up. We are just comparing notes.
Right.
Okay, because the next beach patrol was the Ocean City Beach Patrol, Atlantic City Beach Patrol. And then other patrols started calling me over to help them with their rookie school preparation or look at their manual. So it really manifested itself in its own way with something I was very passionate about.
Yeah. And how many people, like in any one year, try out to be a lifeguard, and how many people actually make it? Like on average?
I would say each beach patrol has about 45 to 50 applicants.
Wow. Okay.
And then at the end of every beach patrol will be a little different than how many they need, but I would say 1/4 of them make it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is there like a certain limit on how many times you can try out, or can you continue? Is it like once a year or?
Well, let me put it this way. After I got done in Wildwood Beach Patrol, another beach patrol asked me to teach the rookie school because I left there and because I was a school vice principal. So I had a 10-month job. So I always fit my work in, but really the driving force, I worked my school job around the beach patrol.
There you go.
And that said it all. And that's when Jerry just threw the towel in. She realized I'm not getting off the beach. So I got on the beach patrol, and then Tom, my son, was in it. So
I heard you taught Tom how to swim at 3 or 4 by like throwing him into
throw
the
right in the
ocean.
water. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, throw him right in.
And did that work? I mean,
Well,
obviously it worked to some extent.
Well, what I wanted to work was, because that's what my father did with me. And I knew it was a good lesson. I learned how to swim real fast.
Wow. Well, yeah.
And then that's what
survival of the fittest.
Right. So he was out, and then he was like panic, but I was right there.
Yeah.
But for him, I was 100 miles away.
Yeah. Did you teach Liz how to swim like that?
Yeah, the same way. Yeah, throw in the pool. But
so he got the ocean, Liz got the pool?
No, I did both in the ocean. Because it was something that we were always in the ocean.
Yeah.
Like when we didn't go in a pool, we went to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Not me anymore, but we're on the beach more than people that have a house on the beach.
Yeah, amazing.
We're just there. We'll drive to 15 minutes, go to the beach for the day. And our routine was go to the beach for the day, then go out to lunch, dinner or whatever, and then go home. They both fall asleep because it was a full day.
Yeah.
So it really worked out well.
And was there an expectation when they were growing up to one day lifeguard? Almost kind of like in the military. Sometimes, like if you come from a military family, there's almost like even if you don't, there's just this sense of like, our family does this. Is this kind of,
family business.
The family business. Yeah.
Yeah. We're probably, our whole family is the most family members in South Jersey history.
Wow. And how many, if you had to guess, were
I'd say
lifeguards?
28.
Which is incredible if you think to audition to be lifeguard, only a quarter really make it.
Yeah.
I know that 28 of you had the skills to.
Yeah, well, my father probably was the best athlete I've ever seen in my life.
Oh wow. Yeah,
I
mean, street fighter.
He's a street fighter, but he was a wrestler, and he was a gymnast. He was an unbelievable gymnast. I mean, he used to just walk up steps on his hands.
Wow, incredible.
And walk down the steps, full balance. And he used to do where he would be doing a handstand and he'd have someone stand on his feet.
What?
Yeah. It just really unbelievable stuff that he did, that he couldn't go anywhere with it because he got married and then had 12 kids.
Sure. Yeah.
But
That'll do
but
it.
he always had, if he had less than 3 jobs going at one time, he felt he wasn't doing anything.
Yeah. And you, along with some of your siblings, have also been amazing athletes as they've grown up, right? Like Gracie played basketball,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Johnny was also a lifeguard,
Johnny
right?
was a great athlete. Gracie was a great basketball player. Johnny threw the javelin, played football, basketball, lifeguard, and swimming. My brother Chris was 3-time national champion, best rower in the United States.
Wow.
And
And Chris's children are also really talented athletes.
Chris, my brother Chris,
Yeah.
oh
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
phenomenal. They're all
Yeah, it's interesting to think if some of that is a mixture of genetics, right?
uh-huh.
Or some of it is like just the nurturing that happens because as you're exposed, right? If your parents are athletes,
Right.
probably the things that they enjoy to do with their children have some kind of semblance of like
Right.
athleticism. And then, sometimes it's like if you learn something really young,
Right.
then you can hopefully be good at it too.
Well, I think the environment,
Yeah.
situational helps a lot. The competition between the family members trying to beat the older brother, older sister. I think that's healthy if it's kept healthy.
Sure.
It could be detrimental to a family.
Yeah.
It would be like my brother Chris, let's say, for example, would come home from, he went to Handling. He represented the United States in the rowing Handling. And let's say, for example, he'd come home and have dinner. And my mother would say, well, after you take the trash out and you do that stuff I told you to do, then you'll sit down and eat. And he's a world champion rower. She kept it real.
Yeah, at home, you're Chris.
You're still Chris.
Yeah.
Take the trash out.
Yeah.
I'm using him as an example, but that's how it stood for everybody.
Right.
It's my one sister was like my sister Emery was the hydrangea queen of South Jersey. Very pretty girl.
Yeah.
And all my sisters were, but she was hydrangea queen for that. And he would make sure when she came out, okay, after being in a parade or something like that, okay, well, Liz, you have to work at the restaurant tonight. And don't forget that second shift you have to do.
Yeah.
And get out of the gown.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
And that keeps it real, I believe.
Yeah, it's interesting now, though. I do think that children are starting sports much younger in a very competitive way. And I've seen it, and not in all cases, but sometimes like the parents are pushing children to become such super athletes very young that everything else falls to the wayside. So forget your schoolwork, forget all these things. So up until like 10 p.m. with extra coaching, extra training, and then you realize they're like 9 years old, but I think it's definitely a delicate balance to nurture someone's like natural talents, but I think it's important also that they're like their age and also like part of the family, regardless of what other title they have too.
In the house, that's very important that you find that balance. As a father, I didn't let I said, if you want to do this, the only rule we had, it was the same rule my parents had. Every marking period, you do something. You're not allowed to sit home. Don't come home here and sit around.
Yeah.
But more of that should happen where let the kids be like my daughter was a very good softball player. Elizabeth was very good, but she also wanted to be in a school play.
Yeah.
So the coach said, well, we want you to be here. And I said to the coach, she's going to do the school play too.
Yeah. It's important to be exposed to things that you're interested in.
And do the things that you like to do. And,
yeah.
And make that like fun, because the fun leaves.
Yeah.
And as principal of a high school, I always ran into this with my coaches because they would have a superstar kid. I had this one guy, Isaiah Pacheco. He was a student at my school. He plays for Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sorry.
Wow.
And he got 2 Super Bowl rings. But he said, Doc, hey, I really want to play baseball. This is junior. And but everybody's telling him I get injured. I said, Isaiah, play baseball.
Yeah, try it.
Have fun.
Yeah.
Well, he ended up being, this is the kind of athlete he was. He was all state in baseball.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went to, and he's been in the Super Bowl for the last 3 years. And
no, it's actually funny because even you've met my daughter Naya, who has grown up really loving dance. She does Irish dancing, flamenco, and ballet. And we just moved to Clearwater this year. And before we moved, I spent all summer looking at ways that she could continue Irish dancing, flamenco. By some miracle, I found flamenco in Dunedin and ballet.
Yeah.
And I told her baseball is really important to the city that we're moving to. And because we were moving from Orlando, where it doesn't have a baseball team, she just really wasn't exposed to that. And she was 7 at the time. So I said, you are old enough now to watch two of my favorite movies. One is The Sandlot. I don't know if you've seen these, but or A League of Their Own. And she also loves to be an actress. So she just watches these movies and she asked to see them a few times. And I almost know when Anaya is asking to see something again, she's like sitting and becoming a method actress. She's like soaking it all in.
Yeah.
And we finished watching and she says, I'm going to be a baseball player. And I was like, what do you mean you're going to be a baseball player? And we were 1 week away from moving here.
Oh, good.
And I said, I just spent all summer looking at ballet, all these things. And she said, I want to try it. So for ballet and any type of dance, she's so particular about her hair that I thought the minute she puts on a softball helmet, it's over. Like she's going to be like, not for me,
right,
that's right.
Don't mess up my hair.
Yeah. So we go to a sporting goods store. She puts on the helmet and she's running around the entire store having like the time of her life. So I'm like, okay, this plan is not working. So let's go to a softball clinic and just expose her. She's never played. She's never picked up a bat. She's never played catch before, just wasn't on her radar. She's been so slammed with dancing her whole life. Yeah. And she she goes to softball clinic and she's just hitting ball after ball after ball. So much so that the coaches come to me and they said, how long has she been playing for? And I said, this is literally the first time she's hitting.
Awesome. Jeez.
But then I realized because of dance, she had unbelievable hand-eye coordination.
Absolutely.
And so she was, hitting a ball in baseball is like one of the toughest things you can do in any sport. Like the timing has to almost be perfect.
I think they consider the most difficult thing to do.
Yeah. And so
I think that's rated that way.
But when you're talking about exposing children, especially to their interest, I felt so glad in that moment. Instead of saying, no, we're doing dancing, I've already done this, to just let her follow her interest.
Right.
Because suddenly she was exposed to something she's never done before. She found like a new talent. We then entered softball craziness and are at the fields like 5 times a week now. My son Luca is begrudgingly in t-ball because we're always there. But I do think that's so important to expose your children and not pigeonhole them so early.
Exactly.
Because I think now more than ever, there's almost a push. Like if you are not well-rounded, like you can't just be one thing. Like to be successful,
Absolutely.
you have to, and that's life, right? You have to do many different things and not be afraid to just continue on this one path. But I think we teach our children early that it's okay to try things and you might not even like it. You might not even be good at it, or you might be great at it. But either way, it was good to try.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed 100%. And I see it a lot in school.
Yeah. So talk to me more about what it's looked like for you, because obviously you went into education, but then what was the transition from education to then being an administrator? And at what type of schools have you mostly taught or been in administration for?
I have varied experiences with that. Like I told you before, I went back for my master's degree and I got I was teaching marketing and ed at the high school level. And I got my master's and I just threw my hat in the ring with this job, thinking really that I wanted to get experience interviewing. So I was not really thinking that I'm going to get this job. And it probably is the best way to go into a job.
Yeah.
Interview. I go into the interview. And I found out from the secretary, because that's where you get most of your information prior to.
Oh yeah, they're the key.
So I did know that, but it was more, I'm social anyway. So I don't like to sit there and not ask questions or talk. So I was asking about the other applicants, how many there were. There were 13 applicants. I said, well, so I didn't say this to the secretary, but I said, I'm doing this to just get the experience of interviewing.
Yeah.
I got the
It's
job.
important. Yeah.
I was
There
a
you
vice
go.
president. I got the job. They called me. I got
And you
come
had
back with
been
second
teaching for how many years
5
before
years.
that? And was it just to get the experience, or was there any point where you thought, because administration is not for everybody. So is there a reason that you even had that kind of thought that this is a job you wanted to go for?
Actually, it was financial.
Okay.
I was doing that because Jerry used to be a writer for South Jersey Gas Company. When we had children, she didn't work outside the house. So the dynamic changed quite a bit. So I had to step it up. And so I went for the administrative job. So that's what that was
Yeah,
for.
that makes sense.
And so it was economics and get experience. And then I was thrown into the job of being assistant principal. And I was the interesting thing about that job was, well, of course, I went to Temple University, but I went and got this job in Bridgeton, New Jersey, right outside of Bridgeton, called Ghoultown. And being a history buff that I am, I started digging into Ghoultown and seeing what it's all about after I got the job. And I started a little historical committee with the students, which is what generated the research. Let's research your roots.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here, Ghoultown's the oldest Black community in the country.
Oh, wow.
So it was the first Black community established. And there's a whole story how that came about, but it's named after John Gould, who was a slave. And he was given the ground because everything was territorial then. And he was given the ground in there because he was disowned by Fenwick, the guy that founded Delaware. But that's a history story. But the other story is that I was there for 5 years and I loved it. And I learned a lot, but then again, I had to make a financial move. It was a very socioeconomic deprived community, and they couldn't. They offered me to be the superintendent, but it still wasn't enough for me what I needed to do. So then I got a job in Vineland, New Jersey, as an assistant principal.
And what's Vineland's demographics like?
Right now, well, let me give it to you this way. When I got into Vineland Middle School, where I was a vice principal for 6 years, the Hispanic population was 19% of the population of school.
Okay.
When I left in 19 years later, it was almost 70%.
Oh, wow.
Hispanic.
Incredible. Yeah.
Huge changeover, big dynamic switch in the whole face of the community. But
probably reflective too of like the US change as well, like Hispanic
community
is growing everywhere.
Well, the interesting part about many of the Hispanics at that point were following the crop. So they come down to Florida. So we had that transit group in and out of school. But what many of us educators tackled at that point was you can't take your kid out and go down there and have them working on the fields, which was happening. And I got very involved in that. Like these kids don't go down there and then come back here and expect us to pick up. And we said it in a very nice way, but and of course those people were broke.
Yeah.
So they were in a whole different situation. We're just trying to survive and we need our kids to work.
Yeah.
So they were living in those huts off the fields. If you go by in many areas where there's migrants, you would find that the kids were working and they were hiding them.
Wow.
So we start IDing that. So it really worked out well. Not just me, I was doing it, but there was a whole group of the educational community and the government, the society itself saying, we got to make sure we're addressing our needs here. So anyway, people start nailing down jobs and staying there rather than following the crowd, get other kinds of jobs, especially the Mexican population. It was horrible the way they were living. But it worked out pretty good over the years, but it took a long time to do that. And my school was all bilingual, by choice. The bilinguals in Vineland back then, every year they were in a different school. So you said, this is your year, and this is your year. We made it our school the bilingual school.
Oh, it's great. And that's great for exactly. In a time of instability.
Right. And they needed that because they felt unstable with that. Yeah. And then the teachers that came to teach bilingual would be an itinerant teacher, would float all over the place. So it was crazy education, bad for the kids, bad for everybody. So I did that for 11 years as assistant principal, became principal, and I was principal at the middle school level, same building for 13 years.
Wow. And you also are trained in mixed martial arts, right?
Yeah, yes.
And has any of that come in handy as a administrator?
Yes, yes, it has. Mainly,
And I'm sure, do you get some of that from your dad, the mixed martial arts
no, my father
picture?
was just raw,
Just raw.
rough and tumble.
Yeah,
But not with us.
yeah.
Not with us. But he actually tried to shake that reputation. He hid it for years from us. Like, don't do what I did, guys. But eventually he'd say, hey, they'd see you out in the community when we were up in Philadelphia. Chuck McCann's your dad? Oh yeah. Oh God. Yeah, he beat the that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
and you're like, what?
I know, Dad. What
My
happened?
dad?
And he's now selling real estate, wearing his shirt and tie, trying to make money. And he go, listen, I'll tell you
When you're
sometime.
older, yeah.
And those stories never came.
Yeah.
Not really, not to the T where, it was survival.
Yeah.
It was survival. I mean, he lived in an Irish neighborhood and they were all broke.
So when did you start studying martial arts?
When after high school, my mother again knew that I wasn't going to go to college. She thought that. So she's, why don't you try this karate thing? Go try it. She knew she had to keep me busy. So she pointed everybody in a direction that they needed to go in. So I got really involved in it. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked fighting, to tell you the truth. But competition wise.
Yeah.
So I started getting these tournaments and I did very well. But it taught me, but my sensei, that's what they call him, senseis, was just a phenomenal guy, Steve Johnson. And he was really big on, don't ever take advantage of your skills unless you have to. Well, when I became a principal, or even when I was a teacher, but when I became a principal, I learned that when there was a fight going on, I just would be in defensive position, not attacking kids.
Of course, yeah.
Just make sure that I don't hit a kid or something like that. And if someone that is trained in that, you can hit a kid and kill him. You hit him in the spot. So I was always, and then I ended up getting tied up with, after we moved down to Shore, with a guy named Joe Hess, who was a heavyweight champion. He fought Muhammad Ali, and he was my sensei. And he ended up, I was in the Shore area. He ended up coming down to Florida, Miami-Dade, and he took over the police department in Miami-Dade, teaching the police officers how to fight.
Wow.
Defensive.
Yeah.
So, I did that for a while, got in a lot of tournaments with him and loved it. Yeah, it was good stuff. But it helped me help the kids.
Yeah. I was going to say, how do you feel like it helped you the most in with the kids that you were in charge of? Besides self-defense occasionally.
Well, first of all, the kids, what helped me with the karate and being from a big family and being in sports all my life, when I got into these schools that were like not, there sometimes wouldn't be a white guy around.
Yeah.
I'd be the only Caucasian in the room. It never bothered me.
Yeah. You didn't even think about it.
It never crossed my mind. It really didn't. And so that confidence comes from training. Yeah. You got to train your mind.
You're also confident that if even the most unexpected situation happens, you're like ready.
My reaction drills are, my instinctive drills are to defend, block or whatever. Right. I'm teaching my grandson now the circle block, so he goes, Pop, that he's hitting his hand. I said, no, you just gotta, he's trying to go fast. Smooth. So I said, it'll come.
Everyone remembers that moment from Karate Kid,
right, exactly. Wash the dishes.
Exactly. There we go.
What's that mean? I said, I'll tell you later. I said, just right now, just go like this real slow. But those things, I did that with my son. I teach him like just balance, just get on your toes. Always have a square horse. Know how to handle things. Yeah. So that helped me out tremendously. The arts. If you get a good sensei, it's beyond anything you ever learn. If you get a bad sensei, and there's a couple bad ones out there that do it for the wrong reasons, just get away from them.
Yeah.
Just move on and just get out of it. Don't get involved in describing things to them or tell them what they're doing right or wrong. Just get away from them.
Yeah.
But I never, and then when I went to Temple, I started another style, Okinawa style. So I had like Kempo, Urban Goju, Okinawa. I got a bunch of nothing. It has accumulated to nothing. I got these
No.
one or two, but no, because I look at it this way. I got the internal knowledge, which
Yeah,
is
of
more important.
course. Yeah, more important. So your son, Tom Jr.,
Right.
followed in your steps and became a lifeguard.
Right.
And then your daughter, Elizabeth, also went into education, right?
Yes, she did. She
Yeah.
was a lifeguard also, but in a pool in Sea Isle. I mean, in Vineland. Um, but Elizabeth went to Rutgers, and then she got her degree. Tom went to Temple also. He got a business degree. Um, and they're both doing well.
Yeah.
They're good kids. That's all counts.
What do you think, like teaching, like now seeing your daughter going into education, how different is it than when you went into? Because I mean, even for me, when I look at my children, and school is so different.
Right.
And there's, iPads, phones, like all these competing interests, what that didn't exist when, you went to school, when
Right.
I went to school. And they are competing interests. There's things that like are taking attention, right, from the kids.
Right.
And she teaches fourth grade, which is such a critical
Yeah.
age.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you see, like when you see her journey now and you think of your own right now, because you've had years of education and teaching behind you, what would you say like the main differences being an educator today than, when you started?
Um,
Or maybe similarities too.
Probably, well, I think the most detrimental thing that I see from is the deterioration of the family unit. And that is the crux of the kids' growth in school. And you can almost tell as an educator, the kids that are in totally dysfunctional families.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, they don't even know who their father is. They don't know where their mother is. I mean, there's really, really sad stories. I mean, I'm principal of a school now that you just hear these horror stories. So I think that part is something that the school can't control. That's a cultural problem. That's a societal problem, and that's across the board. It's just not. There are kids that do not have the contact with the parent, the parent structure, and you have to have that. Not have to, because you might have strong mothers or strong fathers that can do both. But it's really you really need to have that support when they go home. They need to have that support, and a lot of the kids don't have that.
Yeah. I also think our society has turned so much more like individualistic. Like I even know when I was growing up, even though I grew up obviously in a very tight-knit family, like the neighborhood also took care of you. Like I always joke and tell my kids, like when I came back from school, like my mom would almost, or the weekends, release us like dogs. Like we would leave in the morning and we'd go out and play. We'd eat lunch and dinner anywhere.
Right.
Or I would return with friends from the neighborhood and say, we need to eat, or,
Exactly.
and everyone knew each other's families, but it was really like to the extent that the US has it, because many other cultures, especially in India and other places that we know, like the village really takes care. There's a community feeling.
I love that term.
Yeah. And I felt like we had that so much when I was growing up. And now even as a parent, even if I would want that for my children, I would never let them leave our house and
I never
just
did.
and just go and come back. And then we try to replicate it to some extent, right? You might have families that you're close with that you try to get together with, or you're lucky that you have some family members that live close to one another. But sometimes like you find yourself in a city where you don't really know any family members, and our society's really just become about the nuclear family. So when there's like a critical component in that missing, I think before we used to have fillers for that. Like even if your parent passed away, like your aunt still lived down the street, your neighbors really helped take care of you.
A support
And
system.
now you're just in your car, you're like moving like this, and your doors are locked, and there's so much more weariness about letting other people into your life. Which ironically too, with social media and things like that, we're letting strangers into our life, posting pictures, doing all these
Right.
things. But in reality, I feel like we've become very like closed as a society. And I think when a piece is missing, like a child especially can really feel that. But I think probably when you were growing up, or even when I was growing up, even if we didn't have a piece missing, we had like extended families, or you had so many siblings or so many different viewpoints. And
You had
here
a
you
couple
really,
uncles and aunts, huh?
yeah. You just feel like you're part of
Yeah.
something
Yes.
beyond your nuclear family. And now it's very much like just us. And if there's something missing, a child can really, you see that, you can tell the difference.
You can. You
Yeah.
really can. Um, and it's good and it's bad. It's good that you can pick up on it so quickly, but that and the reason it's good, it's bad because it's happening, but it's good because if you can identify it as a school principal and try to tackle it in a way where the kid doesn't even know you're tackling the issue, um, it is really beneficial. The for me, and the way I kept that alive was when I was principal. I've been principal for 25 years. Um, I eat in the lunchroom every day
Mm-hmm.
with the students, and I eat in a different lunch period every day. So if I ate with the seniors yesterday, tomorrow I eat with the freshmen, and then and I switch it up, and I just get at the table by myself, read the newspaper, and have my lunch. They they bother you less than the teachers do.
Yeah.
They like you there
Yeah.
and they see you there. And then
They feel like
eventually,
you're one of them
right. And
doing the
so I'm
same
eating the
thing.
same food, and I get in lunch line and just eat
Yeah.
my lunch and pay for my lunch and then sit down and eat my lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And um, but you pick up on those little nuances that you should
Sure.
know as a principal.
Yeah.
You know, you find out where the drug trafficking is going on. You find out who's being abused just by overhearing. And I don't sit at this table every day. Next time I'm at that table, another lunchroom, but you pick up stuff.
Yeah.
And that's important. But it's important for the kids to see it too.
Yeah. So as you know, I do executive search now. And so I spend most of my day talking to leaders in higher education and kind of figuring out, because I mean, I think partly because of how I grew up and my parents grew up, and even hearing you today, truly believe that education can completely shift someone's life, right? And
Mhm.
as you've seen, there's so many first generation high school grads, college grads. And so that's also, my parents came because of their education. I've seen how much education can transform, and I've
Right.
dedicated now my career into helping find really amazing leaders, because I think you really see like the power of one when you have a good leader in an institution, how many people it affects, like the employees, the students. And I've found in interviewing so many, presidents, provost deans, the ones that are so impactful are the ones that spend so much of their time listening as leaders instead of saying like this needs to be done, that needs to be done. They're really on the ground, like really hearing and soaking in the needs of the community. They have the humility to also be amongst the community, because there's a lot of top down leadership that's ineffective because it's more about like the
Correct.
power of being the leader.
Yeah.
But I really do feel like the true leaders are those that maybe someone doesn't even actually realize they're sitting next to the principal, the president, and because they've become part of the community. So I can only imagine like, and now I think, right, if I get this right, you're coming into schools that really need transformation
Right.
because you've done that
Correct.
so effectively at your other places.
True.
And do you find that still, that you're able to kind of sit and listen, or now that you're tasked with helping and like helping places, do you feel like you have to come to action very quickly? or a mix of both?
It's a real challenge because when you're coming in as the principal, interim principal, which I'm doing right now, you have to sit and watch for a while because you can't just walk in and tell someone what to do, like some teacher, and say this chemistry lab is not the way it should be, or some other directive, and a top down, as you say, action, and that gets around real quick.
Yeah.
The guy's a clown.
Yeah.
The guy's a total clown.
Yeah.
You know,
He's coming
he
in
didn't
with his own
He didn't
agenda.
even teach science.
Sure.
Exactly. He didn't teach that. And then all of a sudden, and you can't, you got to respect even you got to give everybody the respect that they deserve as a teacher, because it's a tough job anyway. And then your job is to, if you do have an idea, you wait for a period of time before you share.
Right.
And that is important. That's very, very important. Same thing with the students. You come in the lunchroom and say, okay, I don't want anybody to be on their phone. Well, you'll be out the door in 4 seconds,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Because the kids live by the phone. So if you're going to do anything drastic, like trying to have the students use the phones at a particular time, you better have your facts together.
Right.
Because things can turn real quickly. So my job is to have those sensories up and to implement at the right time. And you got to make certain of a lot of the different, when you're a principal of a school, let's take away the one I'm doing right now, but when you're principal of a school, you are being looked at by the school board.
Yeah, lots of eyes on you. Students,
teachers, support staff, facilities, community people, and you don't think they're watching, but they're all watching. And you got to be tuned into that, just like anybody in public life. I mean, I've been a public employee for years, but you got to, you got to behave yourself in a good way. You got to, because whether you like it or not, you're a role model for the school.
Right.
And if you do it right, you're the face of the school. I believe that the principal is the cheerleader for the school. Then
you are the brand, right? Essentially.
Right. Exactly. If you know that, but you don't act it.
Right.
You don't go, I'm the brand.
Yeah.
You'll be out the front door in 2 seconds. Especially in Pleasantville. They go, what? Brand this, And I want to, but you've got to be conscious of the fact that they'll give you the responsibility of doing that, as long as you don't disrespect it. So it's very, very important that as a leader that you find out what the kids need and then you try to address it. And there was an example of, I went into the auditorium and I was talking to a teacher, and I had all the teachers for faculty meetings would meet in the cafeteria. So I was talking to a teacher, and the teacher came in and he said, boy, this auditorium is beautiful. I said, how long have you been here? 11 years. I've never been in the auditorium. Oh no. The seats are in mint condition. Yeah. Everything was, that's just a beautiful auditorium. So I go, well, how come we're not using this thing? So same thing with the swim pool. The swim pool, the swim pool costs $1 million a year. Wow. I go, how the swimmer lets it go? The lifeguard says, I've never been here for months. Oh, what? You're kidding me. So it was just a matter of finding out what happened. Yeah. I found out that it was a pipe in the ceiling. Right. That was leaking. And I called the company and I said, I'm going to drive it up and get it. Yeah. What? You drive it up and get it. Well, you're in New Jersey and I can get paid for the district this day. Was there the next day. Yeah. I think education administrators are notoriously known for not doing things the fastest. And so I think that even saying I will come and get it is probably like lightning speed for how things typically move. But that's also probably why you've been in the positions that you've been in, like for places that need real change and they need it fast. They know that you're the person that's gonna actually do it instead of like, hey, I'm gonna do that, and it never happens. Well, it's kind of funny you're talking about that. It was going back to the lifeguard thing. So there was this one particular person said, well, and I didn't say it though. I just, because I wanted to say a lot, but I didn't. I showed it respect. But he says, well, Les, what do you know about lifeguarding? Now you're a principal to school. And I just said, I'll be back in touch, man. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Because it just, what do you do? Well, I've been a lifeguard for, I don't want to do that either. But you got to be kidding me. What kind of response is that? I'm trying to help out. Yeah, exactly. You're going to go get a pipe. Yeah, I'm going to go get the pipe. I got a truck, no problem. So but it's pragmatic.
Yeah.
It's, you can have all the theories in the world. And that's the difference. That's one of the reasons why I wasn't crazy about the University of Penn. Because the University of Penn was all theory.
Yeah.
At Temple, it was all pragmatism.
Right. Yeah, there's certainly
And
ways.
it was, come on, you guys can't tell me about the Ivory Tower where you're in it yourself. You're there living it. It's that kind of stuff. So you gotta back up your talk.
So speaking of lifeguarding, you mentioned also your love for history, your wife's talent for writing.
Right.
Is that how the idea of your book, The Guards, came about?
Yes.
And tell us about your book.
Okay. Yeah. I wrote a book. I wrote 3 books, but my last one was about all the beach patrols in South Jersey from Brigantine to Cape May Point. The first 2 books I wrote about were just from one city, one beach patrol. And what drove it was not just Jerry's good writing, but it was, in addition to that, she was saying, you got all these pictures, you got all this story. Every time I go out somewhere with your buddies, they say, why don't you write a book? She goes, why don't you write the book? I said, I'm a bad writer. She goes, well, you write it.
You married me.
Yeah. And I said, and I always tell the guys, there's probably a little bit more truth to it than I want to admit. I go, I wrote the book and then she rewrote it.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's a good editor.
Right, exactly. So I end up, so then I wrote the first book, then the second book, I got more pictures. So I said, guys, I'm gonna write one more. So I wrote another one. And I wrote the first one in 2001. And then the second.
What was that one called?
Lifeguard in Seattle City since 1882.
Okay.
And then.
And how long did that take you just to write the first book?
A long time.
Yeah.
Because I was dragging on.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm getting it done, but I wasn't getting it done. Because I was going for my doctorate and I was just tied up with a lot of other stuff.
And you're working full time and lifeguarding, studying.
Yeah. But I'm not at my best that way.
Yeah.
I'm not at my best sitting around talking about it.
Yeah.
But it worked out great. Then I got more stuff. So then I did another book, volume 2 of the same book. And then I started getting a lot of real positive feedback from my friends and said, hey man, you ever think about doing all of our beach patrols? I said, no, I never did.
And how many beach patrols are there?
15. I wrote about 15 beach patrols.
Wow.
And this is real lifeguarding. This is not make-believe lifeguarding. This isn't here's how it would happen if you were in rough water. This is real stuff, unfortunately. Drownings, rescues, races. South Jersey lifeguards are incredible. The history of, and when I dug into this, it was really scary in a way. But when I started doing all my research on each beach patrol, and I have a little story about each beach patrol and then some of the interesting individuals over the years that impacted not only lifeguarding, but rowing. And we end up some of the best rowers in the world from South Jersey, my brother Chris included. But yeah, I mean, there were just some incredible athletes. But what happened was it just expanded and exploded, so to speak, as far as looking at each city along the South Jersey coast.
And how did you collect like the history of each patrol?
I went to each city.
Okay.
And sat down and did primary research, talked to people directly.
Wonderful. Got pictures from people that they had.
Yeah, the guys gave me the stuff. I went through each city, sat down, cup of coffee. It was after work, a couple of beers, talk about just the history of it. Met a lot of people that were the grandsons of founders of lifeguarding, so to speak, the Yates family from Atlantic City. 4 generations of lifeguards.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Each city, the lifeguards in South Jersey is a good, clear view of how they developed and what they went into as far as operations and how operationally for rescues. There's some real tragic stories over the years, sad stories, and heroic and great stories.
And how did you come up with the name, The Guards?
Well, I was struggling with this, and for the longest time, I was trying to think of. I believe in writing, and then maybe the name will come up, pop up.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I'm sitting around having a cup of coffee with my son, and he goes, "You know what? We've been talking about this for a while. The guards." I said, "What do you mean the guards?" "That's the name of your book if you want it. The guards."
There we go.
I said, "How'd you come up with that?" He goes, "Well, look at it this way. There's female guards, there's retired guards, there's dead guards, there's lifeguards, but they're all the guards."
Yeah.
It just crystallized the whole thing. It's like it put a big bow, right? And everybody that I talked to in the business said, "Man, I love the title.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that great?"
Yeah, we're waiting for the movie now.
No, yeah.
So the book itself, which I have here, so
Yeah,
for those that see us on video,
yeah.
this is the book, The Guards. It is, there's so much to look at when it's
Right.
beautifully laid out as well.
Thank
And
you.
I think your wife also helped, right,
Oh,
with
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
layout.
Yeah.
But it's incredible. And it's as someone like, myself who really had no idea about
Right.
this type of history. I think it's such an amazing book that you can kind of pick up, and visually it's so stunning, but it's also packed with so much
Right.
history. And I'm sure for so many people that have family members, like you said, there's some like generations,
Oh,
this
yes.
for them is this like once in a lifetime gift, because it really talks about things that they've gone through. And so, and also like how many of the patrols have faced similar things, like you said, like tragedy
Right.
and really amazing moments too, but that they all have this kind of common thread of dedication,
Right.
because to do this takes so much dedication and it's grueling work. And you're like, for every shift, right, you're vigilant the
Yeah.
entire time. But it's really incredible work that I think so many people, even including myself, took for granted, because your safety in places like that, you just
Correct.
somehow
Correct.
expect that, oh, well, oh, there's lifeguards here, but you don't realize what they're actually doing, which is, even if you save a life, and I'm sure you have stories like that, even when you save a life, it's not meant for you to sit and get all the accolades. It's like, get back to your tower,
Right.
because there's still a
Correct.
thousand other
Correct.
people that you have to keep on watching.
You're right on point. The backstory to a rescue is pathetic, really, because you really, after you do, if you do rescue someone and they are being resuscitated by advanced life support, you got to get back in the stand because there's people in the water.
Yeah, there's still people in the
Yeah, and you
water.
got to go back.
Yeah.
You got to go back, and that happened to so many guards over the years. And typically, unfortunately, no one's doing it for thanks, but it's nice to get a thank you.
Yeah.
Say thanks for just saving my life.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. Almost every city I went to, they say some of the people, man, they just walk off like you did nothing. You're exhausted. You're on the beach. You're going for psychological treatment, or you're getting fixed for an injury, and they just that's what we're for there for.
Yeah.
The firemen run into a fire building. Lifeguards run into the ocean.
Yeah. It's
And no questions asked. They run right in,
yeah.
not knowing what's out there
Right. Yeah. And they're
or what
seeing
you're in
someone
for.
like struggling. It could be a riptide, it could be anything, it could be a shark, whatever it could be, but you just go in because that's your job.
Your job, you go
Yeah.
in there without hesitation, and it's a good feeling. But after you step away from it for a while, you go, "Holy mackerel,
Yeah.
that's crazy stuff."
Yeah.
How
many
I just went out
situations did I
there,
just go and put myself in?
and there's a lot of times where we're being rescued, which we have a chain, what we call chain. You're holding on to a torpedo. You're holding on to a torpedo. I mean, but me in the middle, and there's 5 guys on that side and 6 on that side. But at the end of that chain is a victim, or 2 or 3.
Yeah. Wow.
And
Yeah.
if these guys if anybody breaks that chain, they just drift out with that rip. Like, in other words, if I let go,
Right.
and you could be in that situation for a long time getting out of a bad undertow.
Yeah.
And when I explained this, because I go around to the different historical committees, groups, and talk about this, and I explain this to people, and they go, "We didn't know." I
You
said,
just don't understand. Yeah.
you get sucked out. It's right in the beginning of the book. And I tell the people this, right in the beginning of the book, The Philosophy of Lifeguarding. There's a poem about being forgotten after the rescue.
Mhm.
But the history of lifeguarding, and the worst water in the United States is in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
It's the ocean's graveyard.
Huh.
And there's more shipwrecks off New Jersey than many people think it's North Carolina. New Jersey, way more shipwrecks from over the years. You can only imagine when a shipwreck happened in the 1800s and you're walking on the beach the next day. These were all barren islands, but hundreds of dead people on
Yeah.
the beach.
Wow.
All their goods, everything all strewn over the place, just shipwrecked into a rock and just drowned infant babies, people coming from another country. Happened over and over again. And then then they built the lighthouses.
Mm-hmm.
But when you tell them where the land is, but after the crash, the lighthouse couldn't help any.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I grew up with a healthy fear of water because and I've shared this with you, my brother passed away from drowning
Right.
when he was 18 months old and I was almost 7. And so, but it's interesting because you can see how things can change in a matter of seconds. And then how the water can be so beautiful. Like we are doing this interview in Dunedin, right up against a bay.
Right.
And there's so much appeal to the water. You want to see it. People come walk near the water since it's so peaceful. But the water can be a really dangerous place too. And things can, and this can change very quickly. So even on the beach, right, there can be even a really talented swimmer who gets pulled really quickly.
And it's happened. And
to think that we put our life in the hands of lifeguards who we hope are as trained as the training that you went through. Right. But there's a method to the madness because the water is so unpredictable, and it can take a life so quickly. So it's amazing, I'm sure, how many times you've been in that position where it's on you, like that person's life is on you. Right. And there has to be a steadiness to perform or act in the way that you've been trained, even when that person, that victim, is really in the worst moment of their life. And that can turn into the worst moment of your life quickly if you don't have kind of the wherewithal to really know what you've been trained for.
Yeah, you got to keep it together.
But there's something about the afterburn of that too. Like you can save somebody and then realize like how that impacted you too. And like when you're talking about the psychological part of it as well.
The training kicks in
Yeah.
automatically because when we do the training, we do it over and over and over again and make the hypothetical rescues as real as we can because we're out in the water with what we'll do is we'll pretend one of the guys are drowning.
Yeah.
One of the lifeguards or the trainees and go through the whole step by getting the chain of people, get the victim into the boat, bring the boat into the beach, get the victim out of the boat, on the beach, get CPR. We do that over and over again. So you actually have the sequence down where when you get the victim on the beach, open up the airway, start giving them mouth to mouth. Advanced life support by that time is coming down to the rescue to get the victim into the Jeep, transported to the hospital. But we don't just do one episode of that.
Yeah.
We go over and over again where it's routine and it's automatic, and you got to be automatic instincts.
So we've talked about you being a lifeguard, an educator, an administrator, a parent. So many different roles. You've done mixed martial arts, you've done it all. But if you could really look back and imagine you were talking to your young self, knowing everything that you've lived through now, if you could go back and give yourself advice, what are some things that you would share with your young self?
Well, without question, I would have taken education more seriously. But there was no talking to my young self at that point. I didn't like school. I didn't like anything about it. because it was too contained.
Mhm.
But once I did become a student, which was a transition somewhere along the line there, I was a good student because once I became a student, I didn't cut classes anymore. I cut classes in grade school a lot with my brother Charlie, but I didn't cut classes in college because first of all, because I was paying for it
Yeah.
and I worked hard. I didn't have any money.
That's reason enough.
So I was doing my thing by paying for my education, but I didn't know how I was going to do it the next year.
Mhm.
But I knew I wanted to do it because I knew I had to do it. You know, my mother wasn't my back, but in a good way, you know, I mean, but very like navigating way, you know, like directed in this direction. So that was probably that may have changed somewhat, but I think I still would have gone towards education
Mhm.
because I like teaching.
Mhm.
I know I'm a good teacher.
Mhm.
Um, and it's almost like when you're a principal of a school, you're still throwing a lifeline.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, you're lifeguarding your whole life.
You don't really stop.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so if someone wants to buy this book, how would they go about doing that?
Well, it's theguardsbook.com.
There you go.
And if they come up on that, you can get it and order it right there.
Perfect. Well, so I so appreciate you indulging me
Yeah,
in taking
good
part of
stuff.
your vacation, part two.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It
Of
was very
course.
good.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.